Welcome to today's MTD CNC news feed. Now, it's the 19th of March 2020. We're in very interesting times at the moment, but I've been joined by Paul O'Donnell, who's the head of Internal Affairs at the MTA. Paul, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm all right, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, it's an ongoing basis. It's a daily thing at the moment, isn't it? But we at MTD CNC are quite busy. We're seeing engineers still, and they're basically cutting metal, which is great. But and how are you guys at the MTA?
Well, we've moved away from staffing our building fully in the centre of London. So I'm speaking to you from my back bedroom. But able to keep up with lots of the technology that we've got at the moment, like speaking to you now.
Well, welcome for joining us. It's been a very busy couple of weeks for you guys. Obviously, you've had to postpone MACH. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and why it was announced last week?
Well, obviously, we've been monitoring the situation very carefully, really, since the beginning of the year. We've been keeping up with all the advice from Government and Public Health England, and we've been liaising really closely with the NEC as well. And our exhibitors were really keen that we get the show on. But then as this outbreak has worn through, it's become more and more difficult. And our first priority obviously was the health and safety of the 30,000 people that will visit MACH and work at the show. So our members of staff. And then we were also very aware that what we needed to do was produce a really good platform for exhibitors to show off the technology, show off their companies. And it became increasingly apparent that the time to do that was going to be January 2021 rather than April 2020.
Well, I think it was the right decision. I mean, look at where we are on the 19th of March now, Paul.
Yeah.
But can you tell me a little bit why you've chosen January, and do you think numbers would be as they were in April, for instance, from visitors, or do you think better?
Well, the key thing about the January date is that we've been able to secure the same footprint in the same halls from the NEC. So all of those companies that were with us for April 2020, we can offer the same space in the same locations for January 2021. So we can really lift the show up and just put it down there, which makes it much easier for companies, rather than if we looked at a different timeline somewhere else in the year. It would have been with less space, so companies would have had to downsize, people would have had to resize stands, people would have had to move, we'd have had a whole new floor plan. So what we've done by going to January is hopefully we've made it as simple as possible for exhibiting companies. In terms of January, actually, start of the year can be a very good time for shows. I mean, Autosport, which has got a heavy engineering component to it, runs successfully 10 days before MACH's going to be running at the NEC. So, we think as a time of year, and given that it's the start of a new year, that we should be over this coronavirus problem, we reckon it's a really good time.
Well, I tend to agree with you, and also my colleagues at MTD CNC also. Now, I've been visiting engineers this week and last week. Increasingly, they're becoming a little bit worried. What advice would you actually give to them at the moment, Paul?
Well, I think the key thing is to make sure that you're following the advice from Government and Public Health England. There's advice available on the MTA website. There's advice available through the Friday brief. We've got HR partners who can help you with those sorts of things. But also, making sure that that you're talking to your banks if that's something that you need to do. If you're concerned about the financial concerns going forward, really keeping your eyes and your ears open, and hoping preparing and planning for a whole range of different eventualities.
Now you have the opportunity to lobby, don't you? In other words, you visit the House of Commons, and obviously that's closed at the moment. But the information that's coming out in reference to grants, loans, etc., where can engineers actually go to get these?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that government's announced. There was a budget, obviously, it was only about 2.5 weeks ago. It feels like a longer time ago than that. And that had announced a number of things that government's looking to do. So they're looking to cover statutory sick pay. They're looking to use time to pay. So HMRC will look with forbearance on companies particularly in regards to the VAT bills that people might have coming up. But there's also a scheme called the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan. It's based on the EFG that we remember from the last recession, and that had actually been carried on. And again, details are being thrashed out, and the size of the scheme was really increased only earlier this week, so that government's now looking at potentially at underwriting £330 billion. That scheme at the moment looks like it's going to take the form of a sort of a 6-month interest-free loan, and that will be available as of next week through companies' banks. So the British Business Bank sits behind the commercial bank, and they underwrite that loan into the company, and government will pick up the interest that's due to the bank. Yeah. So that's kind of the key thing that government's doing at the moment.
Thanks for clarifying that, because I think at the end of the day, sorry to butt in, but a lot of engineers are getting lots of mixed messages, I suppose. Where do they go? Is it commercial? Is it business to business? But one thing the MTA does do, you look at forecasting. Now, as I say, awkward question, but what's your view at the MTA in reference to the machine tool sector, maybe in the next week, the next month, the next 6 months?
Well, we've been looking at growth in the sector in the back end of the year. I think that given what's going on at the moment, I think that clearly means that the front half of the year is going to be really, really difficult, and statistically it's going to look a lot weaker than it would otherwise have done. But provided that the disruption of the virus is measurable in weeks and months, then there should be a rebound into the back end of 2020 and then into the beginning of 2021. That means MACH's well placed in January, but actually, if you're taking a longer term view of the industry, then the sorts of fundamentals that were in place before, the sorts of high demand that we were seeing from sectors like aerospace and power generation, that's not going to go away. The fundamentals aren't changing. What we've really got is a short term, what economists call exogenous shock. That's something that's coming from the side that's hitting business now, but we can get through that.
And lastly, Paul, what message would you give to your own MTA members at this challenging time?
I think it's what I said beforehand. I think it's about keeping across the messages that are coming out, making sure that your people are safe, making sure that that you can take advantage of the sorts of advice that we can provide through our HR partners. So look out for tomorrow's Friday brief. Look out on the MTA website. And a piece of advice that I would always say to companies is make sure that your cash flow is in a good position, as good a position as it can be, because we know from the last recession that's a big factor in why companies do get into difficulties.
Paul, thank you very much for joining us. I think some very, very good messages there. Thanks again. Look after yourself. Well, there you have it. Today's news feed, some very, very good information from the MTA. Don't forget to tune in to our news feed tomorrow, where we will have another guest.